Now, in conclusion, we are confronted with the oddity that if we consider what Kierkegaard has to say on these three aspects of the crisis, you will find him very probably unacceptable on at least two of the 3 points, perhaps on all three. Probably some of you will sympathize with his attitude toward organized religion, though some others of you will feel that it's too extreme. Probably very few of you will agree with him that religion ought to overrule reason and that one ought to believe things that are absurd. And perhaps, I don't know, none of you, or hardly any of you, will agree that religion could or should go against conscience. Is Kierkegaard then really just an outrageous fellow who has very strange and bizarre ideas, which after all are just interesting, but who doesn't really have much to say to us? That is not my view. I think that on all three of these points he deserves terribly serious consideration. One can, on all 3 points, obviously accept pretty much what he says if one then draws the conclusion that religion is to be rejected for that very reason. He is much more of a thorn in the flesh, and meant to be, for the religious believer. But let me conclude this lecture by bringing out 3 points on which he seems to me to be particularly worthwhile. Number 1, we find in Kierkegaard, and particularly in that very difficult and abstruse book, The Sickness Unto Death, which comes together with Fear and Trembling in the same paperback volume, complete and unabridged, we find him saying in that almost all men are in despair, whether they know it or not, the one exception being the true Christian, if there should be any true Christian today. Now, this at first glance seems meaningless. Does it make any sense to say that somebody is in despair but he doesn't know it? This seems very strange. It seems as if he didn't know how to use language. Here you can try to defend him in 2 ways. The first way of defending him would be, if I may say so, the theological way, namely you redefine the terms. And this Kierkegaard does, sort of in passing, but if this were all there were to him, I personally wouldn't take him terribly seriously. He does say that despair can be defined as the wrong relationship to God. Well, of course, if you say that, then you can say that almost all men are in the wrong relationship to God, although they don't know it. There's no paradox about that. But then why call that despair? That's arbitrary, to save a paradox by redefining the terms. But Kierkegaard also says something much more interesting to my mind in the same book, namely that despair means being in a wrong relation to oneself. And might it not be the case that almost all men are in the wrong relationship to themselves, although they don't know it? That makes a lot of sense, and we can specify what this wrong relationship to themselves is. They are running away from themselves. They are trying to escape from themselves. And this surely is a profound analysis of modern man, and we can leave open the possibility that perhaps it's a profound analysis not only of modern man, possibly of men at all times. And Kierkegaard would say further that philosophy and science and society all help men to escape from themselves, all help men to run away from themselves. Men are afraid of being alone with themselves because they might encounter themselves. They're afraid of solitude. As Kierkegaard once puts it, they can't think of any better use for solitude than as a horrible punishment. So they seek togetherness. They seek community activities, and the churches help them. The churches become great centers for community activities. The churches help men to escape from themselves. Here I think we have point number 1 that's eminently worthwhile. Point number 2 is that he is against Hegel's dictum that our society is the freest that ever existed, and that what we should do is absorb its values and conform and believe in progress and be proud of our achievements. But surely that wasn't just the view of Hegel. That's the view of almost all our secondary school teachers in the United States today. And Kierkegaard says that this is a terrible view, that we should realize that this optimism is unfounded, that the true individual, the person who takes problems seriously, is in despair. His problems are not solved by science and society, and what you should do is not conform and not absorb the values of your society, but stand alone. That's point number 2. And third and last, Kierkegaard's criticism of liberal Christianity and perhaps of liberal religion quite generally bears thinking about. And his interpretation of Christianity as deeply authoritarian, although perhaps not very appealing to the 20th century mind, might well be historically more correct than the more appealing interpretations to which we are accustomed today. When Kierkegaard says that Christianity is authoritarian, I think he is right. But he is also right when he says that Christianity teaches us to leave father and mother and to stand alone. That the original teaching of Jesus is not that the family that prays together stays together, but quite to the contrary, that you should not pray together, but that you should shut the door and pray by yourself. Here Kierkegaard speaks as a true heir, not just of Jesus, but perhaps of the prophets too. Let me end with a final dig against a very popular contrast today, with which probably most of you are familiar. That between the good guys and the bad guys, the authoritarians and the humanists. We classify people, and the authoritarians are the bad guys, and Kierkegaard clearly was authoritarian. You can quote him along that line again and again. And the humanists, they have the good beliefs. One thing that I will try to get across in all of these lectures, and quite emphatically today in the first one, is that one can learn a great deal from people who were authoritarian, and that Kierkegaard was one of them. We must not say people are black and white. Let's first see whether they are on the right side, and if they were, we will learn from them. But we may find that people who outrage us and who embarrass us and who annoy us and with whom we differ may be among the people from whom we have the most to learn. And that's one reason why I'm devoting these 3 lectures to 3 very outrageous people. Now, let's have questions. Please speak loudly enough that not only I can hear you, but other people too.
Before I came here tonight, I looked at the encyclopedia on the question of distinction, and I learned that it is a problem of getting into one crisis and imagining that it's solved, and then to get into another crisis. The life is that way on, but after tonight's lecture, I learned that the distinctionism, rather, is sort of a rebellion against accepted conditions. Would I be wrong or right?
If I understand the question right, you found somewhere that existentialism was defined as the belief that one just goes from crisis to crisis. I don't think that would be a very good definition of existentialism. This is not a point on which the people who are chiefly called existentialists have taken any particular stand, but you might say, and this is what I did try to say, that existentialists, instead of emphasizing what is ordinary and usual in life, emphasize the crises, and so give the impression that life consists very largely of crises. Between what? Oh. I must confess that I have not read Miss Rand's novels, but I understand that she is a great admirer of Nietzsche's, and so, if so, there probably is some connection, though obviously one should not read all of her ideas back into Nietzsche and either give him credit for them or blame him for them.
Would you think that Kierkegaard would be more apt to attack the Reformed religion than the Orthodox?
He very clearly did attack liberal and Reformed religions. Now, what his attitude toward various forms of orthodoxy would be is a little bit difficult to say. One extraordinary thing, I think, about Kierkegaard is that he did not address himself to religions other than his own. That, for example, he never even writes about Calvinism. He treats Calvinism as non-existent. He does not discuss the Roman Catholic Church, much less does he discuss Orthodox Judaism. That by temperament he would have some feeling for orthodoxy that he wouldn't have for liberalism is clear, I think. But whether he would particularly applaud any such positions, I am not sure, because one thing that's very clear in Kierkegaard is that he does not share the admiration for organized religion as such, or for a deep religious faith, whatever that may be, that's so fashionable today, but he wants a particular interpretation of Christianity, and anything that doesn't agree with that he rejects. I think the answer is no, but the answer is also that that this is not a terribly relevant objection. Perhaps one doesn't have to worry about that too much.